All right. Yep. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first of our series on the Saintly Seven, the seven Black Catholic candidates for sainthood. My name's Mary Ann Bressler, and I am the Parish and Community Engagement Coordinator at Catholic Charities Southwestern Ohio. And I volunteered to do this presentation on Venerable Pierre Toussaint because he has some connections with both Catholic Charities and the work that we are currently doing in this area. So I'm delighted to be here to do this and to share what I have learned. And then at the end, we're going to share a video that will give a little bit more information about the canonization process and where that is right now. So I wanted to start with the prayer that is the official prayer for promoting the canonization of Pierre Toussaint. So all of you in the room can join in with me, and folks at home can just follow along silently. So we'll begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Gracious and merciful God, send forth your Spirit to dwell among us, that we, like your servant, Venerable Pierre Toussaint, may become living witnesses of your grace, mercy, and justice. In a world wounded by division and inequality, may our lives reflect the healing power of Ubuntu, the sacred truth that we are bound together in dignity and love. Let the work of our hands sow seeds of reconciliation, and may our hearts remain open to those cast aside. Make us bold in compassion, faithful in service, and pleasing in your sight. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I'm going to just give a fairly brief description of the life of Pierre Toussaint. There's not a huge amount of historical record, but there's enough to give us a pretty good idea of what his life was like and why he is considered to be a candidate for sainthood. So I just want to point out in this icon that he is holding a pair of scissors that are open so that they form the shape of a cross, which, as you will find out, is really, really a very lovely portrayal of him, his life, and why he is a candidate for sainthood. So to begin, let's see, I guess I should make sure this is turned on. It is. So I wanted to start with this fairly lengthy quote just because it's from a memoir of Pierre Toussaint. And I always think of a memoir as something that the individual wrote, but this was not written by him. It was written about him by one of the people who was a great admirer of his. And I just think it's a really kind of lovely statement. And I'm going to just, sorry, real quickly shrink up this box. It's not a touchscreen. Sorry, folks. Wait a minute. Okay. Sorry. The records of distinguished characters are multiplied around us. The statesman who has toiled night and day for his country is held in grateful remembrance. The hero who has fought for the land of his home and people justly wins the laurels that are showered upon him. The scholar who devotes his pen to the instruction of his fellow beings, the poet and the historian, gradually build for themselves monuments. But there is one class whose silent accumulation of good deeds is not computed, but which is daily increasing the amount of human happiness, and whose influence is like that of the crystal stream which wanders through the meadow, adding to its uncounted portion of wildflowers and verdure. Of such a one, we would speak in the simple, unexaggerated language which corresponds to the subject of this memoir. And I just thought it was really beautiful because Pierre Toussaint was not a person who had great power. He was not a person who held a lofty position, but he was a person who did indeed increase happiness for many, many people. And as you hear about his life, I think you will understand why this was the beginning of this memoir of his life. All right, I need to figure out. Oh, I'm looking at that and I'm forwarding that. Good golly. Okay, sorry, folks. Okay, so Pierre Toussaint was born into slavery in 1776 in Saint-Domingue, which is present-day Haiti. And his enslavers were Jacques and Marie Berard. And Pierre was fortunate in that, rather than doing the grueling work in the sugarcane fields that they owned, he worked in the home. And because of that, the Berards also permitted him to learn to read and write, which was, for someone who was enslaved, quite an unusual and wonderful gift. And so eventually, the Berards in 1787 fled Haiti because a revolution was brewing. And so they wanted to get to safety. And so they left the island. They left most of their enslaved people there, but they brought 5 people with them that included Pierre and his sister Rosalie. So he was able to come to New York. After they got there, Monsieur Berard, returned to Haiti, and he died there. And so at that point, it was Pierre kind of helping to take care of the household. So he was apprenticed to a hairdresser. And this is really a moment that significantly changes his life, the life of his family, the life of the people who claimed to own him, and frankly, the life of people in New York. So he was incredibly talented as a hairdresser. And so he became very much in demand among the wealthy people of New York City. It's described that he learned all of the fancy French hairdos, and he could do them for all the very wealthy ladies. And so they just were thrilled with having him around. He would just make money. He would go out and he made money doing people's hair. And including, if any of you have seen Hamilton, the mother of the Schuyler sisters. So she employed him. So after Jacques Berard died, Pierre supported Marie and eventually also her second husband. So this enslaved person is supporting the family of the people who have enslaved him. And he did that until they died, both of them. But in the meantime, he purchased the freedom of the woman who would become his wife, whose name was Juliette, and other enslaved people. So he did not purchase his own freedom, because he wanted to continue to take care of Marie. So, he could have easily purchased his own freedom and chose not to do that, which I think is an act of self-sacrifice that is remarkable in and of itself, even if he had never done anything significant for the rest of his life. When Marie died, he was freed through her estate. So at that point, he was, self-sufficient. And interestingly, he took the last name Toussaint. And if you are familiar with the Haitian Revolution, Toussaint Louverture was the leader of that revolution. So instead of taking the last name of the person who had enslaved him, people speculate that he took Toussaint as a tribute to the person who began the revolution in Haiti. So kind of an interesting thing to think about. So I wrote a few notes. I want to make sure I don't forget any of them. So yeah. So that's the beginning of his career. And eventually he purchases a house in Manhattan. So he became one of the wealthiest people in New York City. So he went from being enslaved to being remarkably wealthy. He married Juliette, whose freedom he had purchased. She also was Haitian. So in 1811, they got married. He had bought the freedom of his sister, and he adopted her daughter, Euphemia, when his sister died. So he just from the very beginning was a remarkably generous, loving, compassionate person. And so he took her into his house. He enrolled her in a school for Black children so that she was able to receive an education. And he himself mentored her in French and music so that, he would have been speaking French in Haiti. And so he carried that on. He taught her to write in French and English. And I do want to remind you, just this is 50 years prior to the Civil War. So this is a time in America when to be African American and to have money, to be able to educate a child in your household is pretty remarkable. Unfortunately, she died of tuberculosis at age 14, so she did not live to be very old, but they cared for her as long as she was in their household. So, nope, didn't go. All right. Oh, mine didn't change either. Okay. Sorry, folks, we're doing double PowerPoints here to make this all work for everybody online and here. So this is when we really see the development of the qualities and the actions that really led to people wanting to see Pierre Toussaint canonized, because as he made lots and lots of money, he began to basically spend as much of it as he could on other people. So he and Juliet took in orphans of color, again, helping them with education and learning trades so that they would be able to support themselves. He donated funds to a Catholic orphanage that was founded by Mother Elizabeth Ann Seton that did not accept children of color. So, he did not confine his generosity only to African Americans, to formerly enslaved peoples. He established a refuge for priests and for needy travelers. So, just the gospel values that he exhibits of welcoming the stranger and compassion and generosity are just flowering in this remarkable person. He organized a credit bureau and an employment agency. There was a yellow fever epidemic, and during that epidemic, he took care of sick people, which of course would have made him very, exposed to yellow fever. And this one is particularly near and dear, he assisted Haitian immigrants coming to New York City. So obviously, with the revolution down there and just things going on, Haitians would have been likely coming to the States to kind of flee the violence there. And so he assisted them in getting their lives established. He was really a hero of the Haitian community. I do want to read one thing that Mary Ann Schuyler, who is, I believe, the mother of the Schuyler sisters, wrote to her sister when she was in Europe, because this kind of lends to what I'm going to talk about next. She wrote her sister and told her to send a message to Pierre Toussaint. Send my love to him. Tell him I think of him very often and never go to one of the churches of his faith without remembering my own Pierre. And I believe I forgot to write, it's St. Pierre. Even though they were not Catholic, they recognized his holiness and his devotion to the Catholic Church, which is just fantastic. Sorry, did it go? Okay. So he was also a person of great faith. So he went to Mass every day. He was credited as being kind of the spiritual father of Catholic Charities of New York. Catholic Charities of New York was not founded until long after his death. But I think it speaks to his legacy that by the time that agency was founded, he was still important enough and remembered enough in New York that people would have kind of drawn that connection between his work and the work that Catholic Charities was founded to do. When he died, the newspapers praised him as a man of outstanding character and virtue. And just a couple years ago, the New York Times started a series called Overlooked No More. And in that series, they write obituaries of people who had died and not been mentioned and had not been reported, their deaths had not been reported in the New York Times. And so you can look it up. It's remarkable. It's very long. It's a wonderful tribute to him. And I just thought it was fascinating that he was one of the people that they felt like they had really missed an opportunity to honor and talk about as an important person in New York City. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. You guys probably can barely see it because of the sun anyway. Um, so I wanted to kind of finish up. So, I mean, that's kind of the highlights of his life. I'll get into a little bit more of it later, just about kind of after his death. But um, he, so he's credited as founding or being kind of the spiritual founder of Catholic Charities in New York City. But the work that he did is really universally the work of Catholic Charities, even though all of our agencies might be doing slightly different things. Many of them work with migrants. And so the fact that that was one of the things he did really kind of, I feel like, not only connects him with Catholic Charities of New York, but Catholic Charities of Southwestern Ohio, because we are currently serving the Haitian population in Springfield. And so, the people that have come to Haiti from Springfield, or come to Springfield from Haiti, in recent years have done so for similar reasons to the people who were leaving in Toussaint's day. They're fleeing a government that has collapsed. They're also fleeing the long-standing effects of natural disasters. He helped translate for them, and we helped translate for our Haitian neighbors in Springfield. We try to kind of wrap them in our circle of care the way that he did back then, and it's kind of sad that that has been a through line in history, that Haitians seem to need to be fleeing and coming here. But it's kind of a wonderful thing that we kind of carry on that tradition of care and of following the teachings of Jesus and the whole scriptures, to welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, all of those things. And also, a lot of what Catholic Charities, again, across the country do are other things that he did in caring for the vulnerable. So many agencies provide housing. Many of them help people with their healthcare needs. We at our Catholic Charities agency do that through oh my gosh, I can't talk anymore, Su Casa Hispanic Center. So we have health promotions for migrants who come here. Education, he generously paid for people to be educated. We provide educational services for people who need to learn English. He founded an orphanage. We used to work in adoptions. He established a school for Black children. And people would often ask him, why do you keep working? Because he just worked forever. And this is a quote from him at the bottom here, I have enough for myself, but if I stop working, I have not enough for others. So he continued working long after he really needed to support himself for the rest of his life, because he just felt there was so much need in his community, and he wanted to just do what he could for as long as he could to do that charitable work. And he definitely did it because of his Catholicism. He was very definitely devoted to the Catholic Church. And so, this is still disorienting me. Oh, so his legacy, again, I talked about that. No, I already talked about that. Sorry. Oh, well, I had more slides. I don't know where they went. Nope. All right, well, I will just slide free, talk about the other things that I wanted to say. Maybe I might have hidden them because of the video. So just a few things to say. and you will hear it again in the video, but just so they're worth reiterating. So at his death, he was buried in the cemetery of the old St. Patrick's Cathedral. So the original St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, he was buried in that cemetery. And so and his funeral is reported as have been very well attended by both African Americans and white people, that, you know, everyone loved this man for his generosity and just felt like they really wanted to pay tribute to him. And so eventually, and the other thing that he did was he was one of the major funders of the new St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is the current St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. He was a major donator to the fund to build that new cathedral. And so when his cause for sainthood was brought up, his body was actually exhumed from the old St. Patrick's Cathedral Cemetery, where he was buried next to his wife. And he is the only layperson buried in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. So just the fact that this person who was born in slavery became one of the wealthiest people in New York City and is the only layperson buried in St. Patrick's Cathedral and is a Black person is a pretty amazing testament to the time in which he lived, that he was able to achieve all of that. And I think is definitely a testimony to his holiness and his example and his love of God and love of his fellow humans that came from that. And so it's a remarkable story, and you're going to hear a little bit about the cause, but I just think that with all of these candidates for sainthood, that looking at the history of our country, to have 7 people raised up as our first Black Catholic saints is just so important for all Catholics to be aware of and to be promoting, because it's just, their stories are so remarkable. You will hear more about them. And he actually had a connection with Mother Mary Lange, who you will hear about it in a few months, who founded a school, and he helped pay for the school that she founded, which was not in New York, and now I forget where it was. But, you know, it just, he's a remarkable person. He is a model for all of us. And I really hope that hearing this talk will inspire all of you to see what you can do personally through prayer, through maybe activism at some point, if we can, you know, really kind of create more interest in promoting his cause and, you know, getting things going. So Andrew has a video that he's going to play. So I'm going to step aside and let him get that going. Which it looks like he is. So thank you all, folks online. And I guess while we're waiting, if anybody has any questions, if you want to. Oh, is that him? Okay. Are you ready? Okay. We can do questions later. Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing on before we start the video. We've been trying with this series to get a hold of the postulators, the guilds who are championing these folks in their causes for sainthood. And as you would obviously expect, the cause for Pierre Toussaint is housed in New York City. And there have been some fluctuations in the way the guild has worked and being part of Catholic Charities, being part of the diocese, changing over time. And I had the ability to talk with a couple of there's actually 2 Haitian priests, Father Wesby and Father Germain, who are now kind of the leaders in continuing the cause for Pierre Toussaint. But there is not currently a postulator, a person who's the main person in charge, and that has to be named by the Archbishop or the bishop of the diocese where that happens. And as you may know, New York just got a new archbishop in the last 6 months. And so he needs to name a new postulator to be the person to officially lead the cause. The person you're going to see in this video, his name is Brother Tyrone Davis. And he, for a time, worked for the Archdiocese of New York and was the kind of unofficial leader, vice postulator of the cause when some of the folks who were in leadership passed away or retired. And he did it for a time before, again, some changes happened. And specifically, the reason that we wanted to talk with the folks in New York and for other candidates in the rest of the series was to find out what's going on with the cause now. Where have things progressed? Where do we stand? Are there things we can do? That sort of thing. So a lot of really interesting stories, anecdotes, whatnot. In the interest of time, I trimmed a lot of that down. He did tell a lot about Pierre's life he covered, but there's so things are, but he also has some just life, and Tyrone thankfully was kind of first generation of creating the cause, and so he knows a lot of the stories, a lot of the, and therefore has learned a lot of Pierre Toussaint's life. I'm going to share this video, and I video through there, and we're going to show it here on the screen, and then we'll come back together at the end. So
1995, the Pierre Toussaint Guild and cause was not part of the considered part of the Office of Black Ministry. It was considered a separate entity with its own office, with its own director, and many of those persons who were around in 1995 were some of the grassroots people for the cause of Venerable Pierre Toussaint. They moved out of the office, but not out of the Catholic Center, and had their own office. However, in time, the Lord called them all home, and in so doing, it was Cardinal Egan at the time asked me. It was following the funeral of Monsignor O'Connell, who had retired, and he was again he was the vice postulator. Asked me if I would help out with the cause, and of course, my answer: help out with the cause for the time being. Of course, we know in Catholic circles, for the time being means almost like forever, until I say not forever. And so I said yes. And so, in one sense, that was the merger or coming together in a formal way of the cause of Venerable Pierre Toussaint and the office. However, I don't want to give the impression that the two causes, if you will, were totally separate, because obviously there were many things about Pierre Toussaint, about his life, his virtues, that became very much connected to what we were doing in the Office of Black Ministry. As a matter of fact, there were two programs, if you will, that were part of the Office of Black Ministry. One of them was a special award that was given out in honor of Pierre Toussaint. It was an archdiocesan award. It was the Pierre Toussaint Medallion. That was part of the Office of Black Ministry. But more importantly, in one sense, was the Pierre Toussaint, at that time called the Pierre Toussaint Scholarship Program, for young people who were graduating from high school and going into college. It was a very small program. It began in 1983. before I became involved in the ministry here. Um, but it has since evolved and developed to the point where currently there are about 95 Pierre Toussaint scholars. And the focus is not on their high school years. These are college student leaders who begin as freshmen in college and continue with us for as long as they are with us. And that can mean their undergraduate studies into their graduate studies and even beyond. I mention all of that because to some extent, we say to our scholars, and we look at the scholars program and the medallion as being programs that reflect the lifestyle, the life and the virtues of Venerable Pierre Toussaint. These are part of what we consider to be his legacy. Um, and we like to make sure that whether we're talking about the medallion, which is basically given out to older adults, older leaders who have demonstrated by their life a commitment to the church, to the community, to the larger world, that faith and service are critically important. And so whether we're talking about these adults or the young adults, we want to make sure that they understand that the inspiration for these programs, and to some extent for a large part of what we do, is in the life of Venerable Pierre Toussaint. I think when we look at the life of Pierre Toussaint, I think there's so much about his life that speaks to all of us. And I certainly am not talking about all of us who are of African descent, or all of us who are Black, but all of us. There were an order of Black religious women in the Baltimore area who were the Oblate Sisters of Providence, who still exist in Baltimore. And I believe they were the first religious congregation of Black women in the country. And even though Baltimore was considered well, it was the much of the East Coast was part of the Archdiocese of Baltimore. These religious women had a very, very difficult time living and navigating in Baltimore in the church. And as it might surprise us, and much of their poor treatment was at the hands of Catholics. Catholics who looked at them and said to them, shame on you for wearing, the habit of a religious woman. Shame on you for pretending to be a nun. And so consequently, they had a difficult time supporting themselves. And so therefore, who came to the rescue but Pierre Toussaint? And because many of these women were of Haitian descent, and so, but not just because of that, because they were women, that they were human beings, and they were women of faith, and women who dedicate their lives, that Pierre considered it extremely important that he provide support for these sisters. As it so happens right now, the foundress of the Oblate Sisters of Providence is one of those candidates for canonization, Mother Lange. And so, Pierre knew her, and was a great source of support for her sisters, for her and her sisters, because they had no other way of support. And so again, we see this kind of this ballooning effect, this mushrooming effect of Pierre's generosity, and how it was extending not just to his own family, not just to those who were his friends, but to those who were even strangers. We say, wow, how could this one man have done so much? And his whole motivation and his whole perspective was, I have much so that I can give much. And that's what he did. And even when he got to be elderly, and people said, why are you still working, Pierre? And he said, if I don't work, I won't have anything to give. And all the while that he was doing all these things and living his life, he had women whose hair he was doing, many of whom, maybe most of whom, were not Catholic. And he was evangelizing um, in probably the most basic and most important way. He was just telling them about his God. He was telling them about Jesus. He was telling them about his faith. And these women were somehow, they were growing, and they were saying, "Wow, how could how could he think this way? How could he live this way? You know, he's such a great person." And so on and so forth. And they called him themselves their saint, their saint when he died. They recognized that they were in the presence of someone very, very holy. Canonization is not for the deceased. Canonization is for the living. Canonization is about creating men and women of faith, of love, whose lives can inspire us to do better, to do more, as the Jesuit notion of magis, to be more. That's what these holy men and women are about. They're about the living. They're about the living and how the living might become the saints that they're called to be. And I think that even the postulator for Pierre Toussaint made some very, very important points in the Prositio that he wrote, which is part of the document that is put together and sent to Rome to make a case for the life and virtues of this person. That he spoke about the fact that that the majority of our saints are clergy and religious, and the majority of our people are laymen and women. And to some extent, what that may say to laymen and women is that holiness is reserved for the clergy and religious. And it really cuts them off at the knees and says to them, as good as you may be, you will never be that holy. You will never be holy. And the Father Molinari was making the case that we need more lay men and women, canonized laymen and women like Pierre, because the lesson there is, if you are a layman, if you are a married man, if you are a businessman, even if you are a person who lives a life of challenge and enslavement, you too are called to be holy. We're not called to be rich. We're not called to be smart. We're called to be holy, each and every one of us. And so when we have these examples, it becomes an example for us, a motivation for us to live our lives differently. And to know that sainthood is not only the calling on each and every one of us, but it is also within the reach of each and every one of us. And so as we look to Pierre and for all the other candidates for canonization, and particularly when we look to those who might be of African descent, it might be a way of the church saying, contrary to what the world may say, you too are called to be a saint. You too can be holy. You too can be a saint. As a matter of fact, whether or not you have the title, you can still be a saint. And so that's the lesson of canonization in our transition organizationally. The cause of Pierre Toussaint still requires a postulator who would be appointed by the Archbishop of New York. And I say the Archbishop of New York because the cause originated here in New York. and therefore becomes part of the responsibility for the ordinary of New York. Um, Pierre was originally buried in the cemetery outside of the old St. Patrick's Cathedral. He was buried there with his wife and his daughter. When the cause was accepted by Rome, Cardinal O'Connor at the time had his remains removed from the outdoor cemetery at the old St. Patrick's and brought uptown to the current St. Patrick's Cathedral, and had his remains interred in the crypt under the main altar of St. Patrick's, which also is an amazing symbol and message to us, because he is being laid to rest in a place that is reserved for the princes of the church, the archbishops of New York, the cardinals of New York. And in that crypt, underneath St. Patrick's, the main altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral, there is only one layman who's there. And that layman is a Black man from Haiti. And the beauty of where he is in that crypt, I always tell people when they visit, when I go down there, is that if you're standing up at the main level of St. Patrick's Cathedral and you look down into the crypt, which has obviously a door there, a gate there, but you can still see through it. And you look down the crypt, there's only one person, only one spot you can recognize and see, and that's Pierre Toussaint. You know, he's surrounded by people who we would consider to be holy men, some holier than others. But it was clearly Cardinal O'Connor's intention, and I must believe it was a message he was sending when he didn't want to place Pierre in the corner somewhere on the lower level, but he wanted him squarely in the center. And that's where he is today. And that says an awful lot to us about Pierre, about the cause of canonization, the work that we all have to do, because an important part of the canonization process for all the candidates is telling the story. That we have to tell the story. Those who know whatever they know about these candidates have to be willing to tell it to somebody else. You know, we have this other phrase in the Black church community, which is, can't keep it to myself. You know, what the Lord has done for me, can't keep it to myself. You know, that we have to tell somebody about Pierre Toussaint, tell somebody about Mother Lange, tell somebody about Sister Althea Bowman, tell somebody. And in a big way, tell some of our children, because we have lost that connectedness. That again, going back to Pierre's grandmother, where we tell young people the story of the heroes and sheroes, and they're not all the people who made millions of dollars or billions of dollars. The people who lived, just holy lives, and to be able to tell children. Wouldn't it be great when we have little children coming up and they say, oh, I know about this. I was told the story about Pierre and what he did. And that's why we consider the Pierre Toussaint Scholars Program so important, because we want these young people who are becoming doctors and nurses and lawyers and mothers and fathers and engineers to know that they benefited from something named after this man, and that they know something about his story, and they can tell it to somebody else.
Where do things currently stand? Where are things at right now with his cause? And where do you see as next steps, where people can be involved, how others, besides telling the story, and that, I think that's what we're trying to do with this series, is get the story out and let people know about it. But can you talk about where things are right now and what maybe the next steps might be?
What you're doing is a critical piece in the promotion cause, a critical piece. People telling other people about these candidates. Okay, that's a critical piece, but unfortunately, that's a piece that has to lead to something else, and that's a piece where, in the process, we say these holy men and women of service, are still willing to be of service, that they are still in their eternal state, that they are still willing to intercede for us, that they're still willing to do something for us in ways that we may not be able to do for ourselves. They're still, they may have, Jesus's ear. They may have the Blessed Mother's ear, and they may be able to say, shh, they keep talking to me about little Johnny, you know, I think maybe, can you help him out? And through this intercession process, they're not necessarily the ones who are able to cure people. But they're the ones who are able to talk to the one who's able to cure all of us. And so by interceding and asking for our holy men and women to intercede for others in specific cases, we create the possibility of miracles taking place. And those are the kinds of actions that the church seems to require. There are still some things that New York has to work out because the Archbishop of New York, and as you know, we just got a new Archbishop, has to appoint a postulator. And what's the job of the postulator? The job of the postulator is to move information from the pews to the palaces, if you will, to somehow be able to help shepherd information and also the results of miraculous actions on behalf of the cause to the congregation in Rome that handles reviewing those causes and ultimately making a recommendation to the Holy Father, who's the one who must make the final decision. But what's also very, very interesting about this universal church is that when our scholars would go to World Youth Day, and particularly I'm thinking about Madrid and Poland and Portugal, we send them with holy cards, prayer cards of Pierre Toussaint. And we even go so far as to have the prayer translated into those respective languages. So when they went to Poland, we had the prayer of Pierre Toussaint translated into Polish.
Sure.
Why? Because there are Polish Catholics in Poland. And so, and to some extent, the word of the virtues of a man or a woman in a universal church have to be more than just the people on his block.
Yeah.
So it requires this story to be shared with people from wherever they come. And believe it or not, we have over the years received phone calls from people across the country and across the world asking for prayer cards. And you think, how did you come to know about him? I don't know, but I'm sure it was by word of somebody who told the story of somebody who told the story of somebody to somebody. And so therefore, that's what's necessary. Yeah, there's some logistical things that have to be done by the church hierarchy. But the really heavy lifting is on the level of the pew. People telling the story of Pierre Toussaint to other people. People suggesting that people talk to Pierre and ask for his intercession on behalf of their special situations and special people. And then if they feel as though their prayers have been answered, that they share that too.
Sure.
Okay? And not, as they say in the Black church, don't keep it to yourself.
Okay, perfect. I think everybody's done and we're good to go. So we don't just open up if there's any questions that anybody has online or in person about Pierre. Sorry, which one this I can see better. All right. So anybody have any questions? Anything you want to know about Pierre, about our research? Yeah, go ahead.
He does not. I think you actually have to have two. Oh, so the question was if he needs to have a miracle attributed to him in order to become a saint. And I believe he actually has to have two. To my knowledge, there are none, because if he had gotten the first miracle, I think he would have moved from venerable to blessed. And that has not happened yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Brother Tyrone was talking about, that need for it. And it's, if you read some of the stories about people becoming saints or not becoming saints, they'll tell stories about someone being cured and the mother prayed to so and so for this person, but then they talked to someone else and somebody else was praying to somebody else, and so they can't say, well, it was for sure this person, it was whatever it is. So it's very difficult to have that process move forward when it comes to that miracle attribution, because of and it requires a ton of paperwork
and a lot of money.
Yeah, we read that it was something between $250,000 to $500,000 from start to finish to get somebody from the initial to actually being made a saint.
Because so part of it they've already spent, because to be declared vulnerable, there's a big study of the person and their character and their life, and then a good portion of money is required to, because typically the miracle is a cure, right, of a terminal illness, and so it requires a lot of medical experts to examine and kind of comb through the medical records and determine that there was no like human basically cause for this person to have received that cure. So it's a difficult process. Does anybody online have any questions?
I wanted to mention one thing, just when we were thinking. You heard near the end of the video, Brother Tyrone mentioned Pierre's grandmother. And that was a story that I edited out because it was, again, just trying to make it a little shorter. But he talked about the fact that his faith was really instilled in him by his grandmother in Haiti. And so as he was there and I guess still around her, and I don't know how old he was when he was enslaved, if it was from birth or from some other point, but his grandmother was really a faithful woman and really instilled in him that the value of not only of faith, but also of service. And so that's really where a lot of his charism, his way of being in the world, came from her. And so it's a great story. In fact, one of the things that Brother Tyrone said in the video was, I almost think it'd be more interesting to meet with his grandmother than with him, to hear her story and what it was like in what was, what is now Haiti, and how she navigated that in the revolution, and also the inspiration to Pierre before he was gone, and then still praying for him, obviously, while he was in New York. So, he has that, also that deep history of his faith as well, that I think is really important to know about him too. So.
And if you're interested in learning more, there are some biographies of him, and that memoir that I mentioned earlier on is available. It's a historic document, so I think Google has it somewhere saved on the cloud, and I'm pretty sure there's some other places you could find it. It's kind of a scan of the old document, and the person who wrote his memoir, her name is a long name. It's like Hannah Farnsworth something Lee or something like that. But if you're interested in kind of that more historic record of his life, you could look that up and read about it.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we want to just thank everybody for joining us online, in person. Again, this is number 1 of 7. So we have 6 more sessions coming up. The next one is May 30th. And then the one after that is, I think, on June 29th. So we look forward to having it. And as you probably know from the schedule, we're having them all over the place. This first one, thank you very much, St. Susanna, for hosting us and welcoming us here into this space to be to launch this series. We'll be moving around all over the Archdiocese for the rest of these series. So for those that are here in person, great to have you. Those online, we'd love to have you in person if you can, but also love to have you online as well. So we thank you so much for being with us. The next location is at, I think, the Mother House for the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur. And I think it's on May 30th at 10, maybe 10 a.m. Yeah. If you type in, if you don't have the website in front of you, I think, Jill can share it, but it's, if you just go to tinyurl.com/saintly7AOC 2026, which should be on the page as well. You can get all the information for the rest of the series. So, anything else from Marianne?
No, I don't think so. Just, oh, Diane, do you have a question?
Agreed. Diane just mentioned that the world is there's a lot of challenges in the world, and we need miracles, and this is a great way for us to spread this message and hopefully pray for miracles in all the challenges we face in the world. So good. Well, thanks everybody. Good to be with you, and hopefully we'll see you on May 30th.
Thank you. Thank you, folks online.